Hello, my name is Simon Leon, and today I'll be talking about Andrew Neiman from the movie Whiplash and diagnosing him using the DSM-5 personality disorder criteria. Andrew Neiman is the main character in Whiplash, a 2014 Oscar-winning drama about the world of elite music education. Andrew is a 19-year-old jazz drummer who throws himself at his dreams with extreme intensity. From the outside, he looks like an average teenage boy. He's a young college student who lives at home with his single dad and likes to play the drums. But under the surface, Andrew is isolated. He prioritizes practice for perfection and achievement over relationships. And this identity becomes solely about being the best. He is hungry and willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to be one of the greats. Most of the story takes place in the prestigious Shafford Conservatory, located in New York City, which is a fictional representation of the Juilliard Art School. There is a highly selective conservatory. Think of it as late-night practices, exhausting auditions, and high-stake performances. Fletcher, the head instructor of the studio band, the best jazz band in the country, is an abusive, manipulative, controlling instructor who is willing to do anything to keep his band's reputation. He uses humiliation, psychological manipulation, and physical intimidation as part of his rigorous training. When Andrew joins this band and is under the mentorship of Fletcher, we see him start to develop his perfectionism and obsession. We see him go through Fletcher's intense physical and emotional abuse, but he manages to grow from his experiences. Andrew starts practicing harder, fueled by fear of not becoming what Fletcher wants. We see him try to grow out of his old self and how his path to greatness comes with self-destruction. We see how he wants absolute perfection and how absolute perfection comes with absolute sacrifice. Based on the DSM-5 criteria, the most accurate diagnosis for Andrew is the obsessive compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD. This disorder is defined by a long pattern of perfectionism, rigidity, control, and obsession with order and achievement. The key thing is that it's not about intrusive thoughts like OCD, it's about personality patterns that show up everywhere. The musical culture in Whiplash would probably label Andrew as dedicated rather than disordered, so a therapist inside that world might overlook the severity. But from a clinical perspective, his behavior lines up with OCPD because it's inflexible. It disrupts his functioning and it causes harm to his relationships, well-being, and decision-making. If Andrew were to walk into a therapist in that culture, the therapist might understand that music conservatories push students toward obsessive behavior. She would recognize his symptoms as beyond normal high achiever stress. However, she would still diagnose him with OCPD because his behaviors are inflexible, maladaptive, and present across all contexts, not just rehearsals. But the therapist might also consider how much of Andrew's behavior was reinforced by his instructor Fletcher's abuse and the school's perfectionist norms. The culture wouldn't erase the diagnosis, but it would explain why his symptoms intensified. There's a lot of stigma in this culture. Men are supposed to be emotionally silent, high achievers, and perform well under stress. Showing emotion is a sign of weakness. We see Fletcher constantly shame him for showing his emotions, like in the scene where he cries after Fletcher slaps him and screams at him for not knowing if the tempo was off. This makes it harder for Andrew to ask for help, and others might dismiss his distress. OCPD is recognized across cultures, but not always equally diagnosed. Some cultures see extreme perfectionism as normal or even admirable, and culturally, personality disorders carry stigma because people often see them as character flaws instead of treatable mental health conditions. So first, Andrew clearly shows perfectionism that gets in his way of finishing tasks. In the movie, he's literally practicing until his hands bleed, and he keeps redoing the same section for hours because he thinks it's still not good enough. Even one small mistake sends him into a spiral, which fits the DSM description perfectly. Second, he shows serious overfocus on work at the expense of relationships. He cuts off his girlfriend because he thinks she'll show him down, barely talks to his family, and basically isolates himself just to practice. The most extreme example is when he gets into a car crash and still tries to go on stage. That level of work obsession is a textbook OCPD trait. The symptom he doesn't show is miserly spending style. Andrew never shows any weird behavior with money, and it's not part of his character arc. So compared to other traits, this is the least supported criterion. For a treatment plan, the most effective approach would be cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically CBT focused on perfectionism and rigidity. CBT helps people recognize rigid thoughts patterns, challenge unrealistic standards, and learn flexibility in decision making. CBT is actually supported by research. For example, a 2015 study found that CBT-based treatment significantly reduced OCPD traits, especially perfectionism and work rigidity. So it lines up really well with what Andrew struggles with. Ethically, the big concern is that Andrew might not see his behavior as a problem. People with OCPD often see their habits as strengths, so forcing treatment wouldn't be ethical. He'd need to participate willingly. Barriers to treatment include his environment. Conservatory culture praises overworking, perfectionism, and obsession. Society often glamorizes hustle culture, so he wouldn't necessarily think he needs help. Plus, there's a stigma around personality disorders, so he might fear being labeled as weak or not disciplined enough. In terms of accuracy, Whiplash does capture several real OCPD traits pretty well. The perfectionism, the stubbornness, and the extreme work devotion all line up with DSM description. But the movie definitely dramatizes these traits for the emotional impact of the movie. We see the behaviors turned up to a cinematic level, and we don't get much insight into Andrew's internal thought process, which are actually a big part of diagnosing an OCPD patient. It also skips a few symptoms that would normally appear in a fuller clinical profile. On bigger level, movies like this shape how people think mental disorders actually look like in real life. Film tends to push the most dramatic symptoms, which can create stereotypes or make disorders seem more extreme than they usually are. At the same time, portrayals like Andrew's can also get people talking about perfectionism, burnout, and unhealthy achievement culture. So even though it's not a perfect clinical description, it definitely influences how we understand personality disorders, for better or for worse.